Ugh. Are we good? Okay. Yes, we are. Sammy boy, do you mind doing me a big solid and hitting that button right over there?
Yes, master.
No, not that one! Hey everybody, this is the Inciting Moment podcast. My name's Ian, your host here. Who else here is with me?
I have just been woken up from a nap due to a very large noise and a button press.
Hi. Hi, I'm Sam. Nice to meet you.
And, this is the Inciting Moment podcast. Sorry for that little technical folly of ours. We just happen to have one of those buttons that causes spontaneous combustion. But, who doesn't, I like to think most recording studios have that.
I mean, I know how to push buttons, just not the right ones.
Oh, that's what that button was. I shouldn't have switched the button display with the Staples button then.
Yeah, that was too easy.
Well, for those of you who are tuning back in after keeping up with our usual episodic adventures, we've been away for a little bit, but now we're back. Our little hiatus was just due to the fact that, well, really it was mainly of my own idea because as host I was just having a lot on my plate in terms of some life-related stuff as well as having to work a little bit extra at the job that I have in order to qualify for the insurance that they offer through it. But with that behind me, I've been able to clear up my schedule and actually be able to put some more time into this. And we're going to get back at it.
Life finds a way.
Exactly. And hey, we're coming back revitalized after a nice cleansing break and whatnot. And we got some ideas for all y'all. But of course, with any return, you got to start it a little simple. Straightforward. Do what is simple yet effective. And today, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. We got quite the show for you. Given that it is still the spooky season of Halloween, we're going to be talking about our personal favorite Halloween flick picks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to say right now, given that each of us picked our own favorite film to watch for the season, what a lineup this is.
Oh, I know.
Oh my, you guys, you knocked it out of the park, It was, I'm very happy with this. I guess it does kind of show just the variety and, the different spooky season movies that you can really sit down and say, yeah, Halloween.
I mean, that's really the beautiful thing about scary movies and the horror movie genre as just a general concept, because it's so versatile. Because there's so many things that scare people, that they can get so creative with it, so wild with it, and it's just a groundbreaking genre in general. Because they're not, well, sometimes they're afraid to try new things, but most often they try new things. It's pretty badass most of the time.
Yes,
some
and
of
the
the
beautiful
time.
thing about the horror genre is that there's just so many subgenres and stuff like that. You got sci-fi horror, you got, not my go-to, but you got yourself some body horror in the case of Hellraiser and one of our feature films, The Thing, done by the ever legendary John Carpenter. But more on that once we get to it.
I'm just saying, Jesus was a Carpenter.
You got the classic Grindhouse horror as well, if you're a slasher movie fan.
Oh, absolutely.
Fantasy horror, child horror, scary stories told in the dark, everything, man. It's got everything in there.
Oh yeah, there's a different flavor of horror for different crowds of people, And with each pick, of course, we'll be sure to explain our reasonings why, yeah, you know what? This is my Halloween movie. This is the one I go to every season, or at least most seasons. Because it depends. Some years I sit there and say, yeah, it's the movie I picked out, but then other times like, strangely enough, last Halloween, I actually thought something that felt pretty fitting was actually watching the Tim Burton Batman movies, one of which we actually reviewed a couple weeks ago, or should I say months because of our hiatus, but, you know, whatevs. There's just so many different flavors of horror, you know, and it all has something for the particular mood that you're in for and stuff like that.
Hell, there's even a genre called hillbilly. Thank you, Rob Zombie.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Rob Zombie, for your wonderful, wonderful contributions.
Brought to you in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Oh god, now I'm picturing any one of these films like having a PBS Kids little memo before the movie starts.
Dude, that'd be amazing. I would love if one of these opened up with it. And I know specifically which one. You'll know.
Oh, of course.
Today's episode is one about trust.
Hey, he knows.
Oh boy, yeah.
Have you ever looked at your neighbor and asked yourself, is that my neighbor? Or is that a thing from outer space? The more you know.
Or is that a cosmic abomination waiting to just assimilate me into his biomass? Who knows?
Or it could be worse. It could be a teenager.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Could be.
All right, so
let's start off with one of our first picks. The one that I picked out for this little trifecta of horror films. That being the 1999 adaptation of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, simply called Sleepy Hollow. Directed, of course, by the ever-iconic Tim Burton. Now, this one was an interesting one. There was always a particular sort of flavor horror that I kind of had a soft spot for, and one that I always just found approachable. Not only for Halloween, even though it is very fitting, in my opinion, but really one that I feel like I could watch any time of the year, frankly, and that is just the gothic sort of horror. Because something about that atmosphere I just like. It has so much character to it, and this very much captures that on multiple levels when it comes to filmmaking, lighting, cinematography, costume, wardrobe, effects, and stuff like that.
Very Tim Burton-y. Kind of really, really up his alley, obviously.
Yeah, and actually, in a similar vein to how he handled his take on Batman, this one is also not the most accurate to the original source material. And I actually thought that was the most interesting part. It does take its deviations from it, which of course we'll go into detail as we go along. But to give a synopsis for those who have not seen this, even though I'm just going to say right now for me, it is most certainly a recommendation. Put this on your watch list for the season. Sleepy Hollow has been having something go bump in the night in the form of a literal headless horseman killing off many of the townsfolk of the small town of Sleepy Hollow. And a detective by the name of Ichabod Crane is actually called in to help uncover the reasoning and the pattern behind the Headless Horseman murders to try and make some sense of this unnatural foe to the town. And as he spends more and more time in the town of Sleepy Hollow, he comes to find out that there's something a little more nefarious about the happenings within the town, more specifically between the townsfolk. There is a surprising amount of intrigue. Not just in terms of like, oh, who's the Headless Horseman, stuff like that, and why is he going about killing people, but no, rather amongst just the personal motives behind some of the members of the town. And Ichabod, on top of trying to better understand this supernatural entity, is also trying to make sense of the questionable antics within the town. So general thoughts, gentlemen, what did you think of Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow?
That was all right.
In terms of general thoughts, something I do want to mention, and I'll
My
explain more when we
reaction
get to.
might not seem very much, but that's
Yeah,
about
I
it.
was gonna say. Got you. Okay.
So before I get into my general thoughts, one thing I want to bring up now, but really explain further in Pan's Labyrinth. It's almost kind of funny how out of these three, this is the most like not necessarily cartoony, but I kind of yeah, I'll go with cartoony movie out of the three, considering Pan's Labyrinth is technically like a child's fairy tale. But I got to say, I really liked this movie. I liked its gothic Tim Burton style. I mean, it really is when you think about the spirit of Halloween, like in a more modern sense, and it's kind of flashy, cartoony, dress up, those kind of properties about it. This movie really matches that bill. It's like you said, it's gothic. Which gothic is a beautiful. Gothic is a very distinct style. Like
Yes.
you
Yes.
can you can usually tell when something's gothic. A lot of the character of the movie is driven by this fashion to the movie, and I really like how Tim Burton and just the whole thing just stuck to that and really took this old Halloweeny story about the town of Sleepy Hollow and modernized it and kind of did his own thing with it. And I think that's really where the movie shines. Is it a perfect movie? God no, not many movies are. But what it
No.
did, I really really liked, and that's my general thoughts about it.
Gotcha. Well, what about you, Harrison? How about you go ahead and elaborate on your thoughts?
Give us
Um,
give us the longest meh you've ever given.
yes. So, well, let me set the scene real quick, all right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I, in my brilliance,
Your
thought
genius.
the best
Of
way to
course.
immerse myself in a horror movie is to watch it late at night. And
Mm.
it turns out it's kind of all foggy when you watch a movie at 1 a.m. Um,
Oh.
That's when you feel it the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think so.
you're really in it in the moment. Yeah, it's great. Then you wake up afterwards and you're like, I kind of remember it. It was good,
Yeah.
fun time. I remember it was fun,
I get you. I get you.
but I can't tell you much else besides that. I'm gonna be real.
Ah.
Um, something. I guess the best way to put it is, it just wasn't one of those movies that kind of stuck with me. You know, I can remember watching it, yes, but I
So
don't know.
what's
It just didn't hit those notes for me that makes it like drill into my mind where I just never forget it.
it slid off your brain like water.
Yeah. Which is always a good thing to have a movie that kind of does that sometimes. Sometimes it's just good to throw in a movie that you don't really want to think too much about.
Hmm. Good time
Yeah,
user.
true.
Something in the background.
No, I get
Yeah.
that.
But Ian, please, what hooked you to this movie? Is it nostalgia? I mean, from 1999. We are reaching the point where the 90s kids are reaching 30. But that's another existential horror that's not part of this Halloween special.
That's the
So
next.
Of
that's the next
course.
part.
Indeed. Well, I guess in a way, given the fact that I have said before that I have a soft spot for most films that were done in the 90s or 2000s just because I liked the kind of experimentation that they had going on, I suppose that has a slight hand in it, given that, hey, it was before when things are being shot on digital, and I've really grown to appreciate films that are on actual real film stock because it just has all the texture and stuff like that. But I mean, to be honest, I actually don't have any nostalgic memories of Sleepy Hollow. This was not one of those movies I saw when I was a kid. I just remember coming across it, reading some stuff on it, and one of the things I read was that Sleepy Hollow is one of those sort of throwback movies to a sort of bygone era of horror films, which at the time had the nickname of Hammer horror, usually because it was done by a studio called, I think, Hammer Pictures, or Hammer Films, or something like that. The thing about the Hammer films was that they were notorious for having very ridiculous effects and often very over-the-top performances and stuff like that. And when I was reading up on these sort of traits of those films, I started seeing them left and right in Sleepy Hollow. For one thing, the blood effects that they usually have, splatter all over the place. It's like this candy bright red that when you look at it, it's just like, okay, that looks like paint. But, like, it gets the point across, like, oh, yes, blood all over the place. Just all over that and stuff. I kind of like the idea of throwback films that take this sort of classic subgenre or just type of movie, but they sort of revisit it with some of the modern trappings. And as you do, there is some early CGI in this movie, which does not age well. But I mean, for being a throwback to old horror B movies, hey, it works for me anyway. It's ridiculous looking, but so is a good chunk of the movie and stuff like that. And I guess really, I just really like Johnny Depp in this movie.
Yeah, I do. I do like him. It's his quirky stage before the quirkiness got annoying.
I don't know, like, if I had to put a word to his performance in this movie, it almost seemed like he was, interestingly, like, feminine from time to times. And granted, that's also because Ichabod himself, he's not like a strong, manly man by any means. No, he's still a somewhat scrawny dude that mainly relies on his wits rather than, like, actual physical presence and whatnot. And I think the most interesting part, if we can go into the whole angle I was talking about how, yeah, this is not the most accurate depiction of Sleepy Hollow, is Ichabod is no longer the just, like, conniving coward that he was in the original story. He's actually like this heroic, witty sort of do-gooder that's trying to get to the bottom of the mystery and stuff like that. And I actually thought it was an interesting touch that because the Headless Horseman is this, like, unnatural presence that he just can't fully comprehend, he's actually scared of him.
Yeah.
He actually expresses, like, genuine fear about, like, yeah, no, that's an actual Headless Horseman, and he just came out of a tree out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, I'm a man of science. That's fucked.
Exactly.
That's fucked.
He's being honest.
He goes back to New York and grabs a pistol and says, Sleepy Hollow's haunted.
Yeah.
No, but that is another thing I really did like about this movie is the main character, Ichabod, is obviously imperfect. I would dare say he's not heroic at first. He's doing there just because he knows magic ain't real. So, he's a man of science, of evidence, everything like that, because it's this superstition that got his mother killed. Mm-hmm. So he comes in with full confidence that this guy's probably just a madman or whatever, what have you. And when he starts seeing this mystical mumbo jumbo, he's scared, and he even thinks about leaving. He comes back though, and it's the bravery through his cowardice that shines through, that really makes him into a more interesting character. And overall, just it's nice to see an arc. It's always good to see arcs in characters, no matter what movie it is. The character has to change. I've said this multiple times, and I'll say this till the end of my life. Characters have to change during the course of a movie, unless it's like some weird exception to the movie where the whole point is that they don't change. But that's another thing I really liked about the movie is the imperfection of the characters and how it added to the overall experience.
Yeah. Because at least obviously this is probably more the case in like horror movies, but it was kind of refreshing to see a main character that, yes, he is very fearful about what's going on, but he perseveres through his fear regardless, and still uses his wit to sort of, solve the problem and stuff like that. But, I mean, I also just need to take a second because, god damn, the Headless Horseman is amazing in this movie. He was easily one of the best parts of the movie for me.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the secret for good slasher-style movies or any sort of movie where the prominent feature isn't the protagonist, but the villain. Mm-hmm. They gotta be eye-catching.
Which is kind of funny in this movie, considering, spoiler, that technically the Headless Horseman isn't really even the bad guy.
Yeah, that's true.
The Headless Horseman is actually being controlled by one of the townsfolk, and that's one of the things that Ichabod happens to discover It's just that, oh, somebody's making him do this. And so he kind of narrows down who it could possibly be. He narrows it down that it could be potentially his love interest in the movie. He narrows down that it could be his love interest's father. But as it turns out, no, it was his love interest's stepmother. Who happened to just have no problem with killing off several of the townsfolk in order to get shit done and use the Headless Horseman for her own selfish gain. Which I do want to point out, because her whole thing is that she was trying to gain control and ownership of her husband's estate, and the whole family estate. Which I find interesting because technically that is a concept that was in the original Sleepy Hollow story. Because for those who read it, the whole thing was that Ichabod was trying to sneak his way into having ownership of someone's estate. Which that is still a thing that's happening in this, but it's been blown up from just one person's conniving actions to take that estate into his own hands into, oh, it's a whodunit murder mystery. And that is at the forefront of the person's motives, which I thought was a neat evolution of the original story's main conflict of who gets the ownership of the estate. I kind of like that. It's an interesting, way of making a short story like that much more interesting for a film and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a tale as old as time, Ian. No one can afford to buy a house.
Some things never change.
God. Exactly.
But Harrison, was there anything
Yes.
you really liked about the movie?
Well, Ian kind of mentioned it earlier. I like the design of the Headless Horseman. I'm gonna be honest. I was a big fan of the animated Headless Horseman movie as a kid, and seeing a live action version is nice, and I do love how they did his design.
Yes. It's also helped by the fact that he's technically played by Christopher Walken, and just the idea of Christopher Walken being the Headless Horseman is just absolutely hilarious to me.
Yeah. I mean, honestly,
Especially.
design and style is definitely the movie's strongest points. I think the weakness of the movie, however, is that it, hasn't aged the best. You know what I mean? In terms of, I don't know how to describe it. It's just, I feel like it shows that it's from the 90s. You know what I mean?
I suppose, yeah.
I would say that's the only real weakness I could see in it.
Yeah.
And the only thing is, and this is going to sound very hoity-toity, but it's not a super incredibly deep movie. And that's not necessarily a negative unless you're really looking for something that's deep. It's a fun jaunt. It is a fun horror movie.
Yeah.
It's got some pretty scary moments, but it's got a bunch of sillier moments too.
Oh yeah.
And it's just fun. It's a fun little horror movie, and that's why it's like perfect for the Halloween season.
Yes, and a lot of that really does just come down to the style and atmosphere it has. And really, I think that's what people are in for when they watch it. It's for just the atmosphere and style and just general entertainment of the movie. It's got a decent cast and stuff like that.
It really
I
does.
kind of wish that they utilized Christopher Lee a bit more. I understand that that's, top dollar, of course. But,
Yeah.
it was neat. Which also, I want to point out another little reference to the Hammer horror films from back in the day is that in the scene where Christopher Lee, who's essentially some kind of judge or whatever, he actually tasks Ichabod with going to Sleepy Hollow and solving the mystery at hand. And what I found interesting is that there were these pair of wings, I believe bat wings or something like that, right behind him. And if I'm not mistaken, that was a reference to when Christopher Lee himself was Dracula. Which I was like, oh, I see what you did there.
Well, I mean, shit, when you have the man, the myth, the legend on board, you gotta reference shit,
Yeah, you could also see the Dracula thing too as a reference to Hammer horror, given that Hammer Studios did Dracula like back in the 50s.
Oh yeah, yeah, and that's the big reference, of course. You know, I thought it would have maybe have been interesting if Christopher Lee, for example, was the Headless Horseman, but then we would miss out on Christopher Walken's insane hairdo and prosthetic teeth that he wears in the flashback of the Headless Horseman's origins. Because, oh my god, every time I see that scene, I just laugh so hard. He looks so goofy and I love it.
He really does. I mean, would you describe this movie as scary?
I don't know about scary. It's got a couple moments where it gets, definitely spooky or creepy, but I think that's also a advantage that the movie has, is that it is very approachable for those kind of people where, they want a Halloween movie to watch around the season, but they don't want to be like losing sleep because they're too scared by whatever movie and stuff like that.
Like, you're not going to be scared going to the bathroom at 1 a.m.
Exactly.
Well, maybe a little bit. I mean, there's one or two scenes where, like the witch under the tree and stuff like that.
Like, yes, that did kind of take me for surprise.
Maybe I should turn the lights on when I go up the stairs, just in case.
Yeah. Maybe I'll just kind of flick that on, and maybe the hallway light, and maybe the bathroom light, and maybe I'll just keep it on overnight. Well, why not? What's a little couple extra dollars on the electrical bill?
Mm-hmm. Did this movie scare you, Harrison?
Not really. I am a very big horror fan, so that's part of why the suggestion that I have thrown in here for my movie choice isn't the most horrific horror movie I know. It's just one that's different.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say the one that you picked has like small little inklings of creepy moments and stuff like that. Especially with the one monster that I'm pretty sure people have seen before, but they just didn't realize, it's from this movie.
Oh, the Pale
it's
Man?
Definitely the Spanish.
Yeah.
Yep. I know what it is when you say it that way.
No. Overall, good movie, great Halloween flick.
Yeah.
Not the scariest movie, and if you're looking for like big scares and horrible existential crises, maybe it won't supply to that. But if you're looking for a perfect Halloween night, you're with your buds or with your family or with your girlfriend, and you're in the mood for a nice, fun jaunt of the Halloween fall feel, it's the perfect movie just for that.
Absolutely.
Or if you're having a Halloween party and you need something to throw on your TV to really set the atmosphere where people are just kind of eating and going about, this is a perfect choice.
I would say so too. It's very entertaining, very nice cast, and one thing that I will also just add on before we wrap up this little segment, Danny Elfman doing the soundtrack, excellent as always. I know there were a couple tracks that I was listening to during the movie that sounded like it could have been used in any one of his other movies. There's even one that I was like, wait, is this just being ripped straight from the Batman soundtrack? But, I mean, otherwise, it still has quite a few tracks I was like, this is just perfect. It is perfect for the atmosphere. And I could not have been happier with it. And yeah, Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman. Possibly best possible choice.
Shit. You said so little.
In my opinion,
so
anyway.
much. But this next movie we're about to talk about, I mean, I couldn't really see it as a horror movie at all. It was a very childlike movie. I would admit that David Bowie's bulge is kind of horrific. But, I mean, you're the one who picked Labyrinth, so I mean...
I think you're talking about the wrong Labyrinth.
Oh, no. Which Labyrinth were we supposed to watch?
Pan's Labyrinth, the one that's fully in Spanish.
Look, if I'm going to watch a movie, I'm not going to read it.
Fair point. But this one I kind of picked because it's a different type of horror. It's more akin to a suspenseful movie in the fact that the horror of it is just people stuck in a war and trying to get by, and it has these fantastical elements of this young girl retreating into a fantasy world, but really all of the most horrific scenes have to do with the captain.
I mean,
Yes.
I have a lot to say about that, but before we really get into that, would you mind describing Pan's Labyrinth a little bit to the
Yes, so
like two
Pan's
people out there?
Labyrinth is a wonderful movie about old folklore, and it's set in 1944 in Spain. So it's a fascist-controlled Spain, and the movie canonically happens during the events of D-Day, because about halfway through the movie they hear about that D-Day had just happened. And essentially there's a young girl named Ophelia. This is all during the Spanish Civil War, where her mother married a captain who's part of the fascist dictatorship, and they've moved out to the woods, and the reasoning why is the captain's out there because he's hunting for rebels. And Ophelia does not want to accept this captain at all as her father, and eventually finds her way into this labyrinth in the woods and meets a faun, which is a half goat, half man, who tells her that she's actually a long lost princess from the underrealm and has to pass through 3 trials to go back home. And the whole movie is this sort of back and forth of the horrors happening in the real world to her trying to retreat into this fantasy.
Man, where did I even start with this movie?
Oh, I know. This is an interesting one to sort of approach. Because at first I didn't know what to make of it, but after having some time to, like, let my thoughts sort of percolate and whatnot, I have a better idea of it. But I mean, hey, what did we overall think of Pan's Labyrinth?
This is one of my favorites, I will say that much.
I mean, just in general, whew, lad, good God. Whew, you kind of, when I first saw the trailers for it so long ago now, it's kind of crazy to think about. I was expecting a more, fantasy-esque, trek through. It's like a Narnia. I was expecting like a Narnia when I first saw the trailer so long ago. And man, yeah, no, it was Narnia if it was hooked to meth. But
Accurate.
so it's a very good film. It's an incredible film. It's horror in the fact of the horrors of reality. With, as Harrison said, this fantasy world interwove through the eyes of this child. And in terms of just general thoughts, like I said, it's fucking amazing. What I really, really, really liked about this movie, in the shortest way possible, is how fucking real it felt. It didn't hide anything. If something awful is about to happen and they cut away, when they come back to it, that awful thing has happened and you see the results. And I love that. It's a movie that treats you like an adult, that treats you that it doesn't take you for a fool or try to hide anything. It just shows it all to your face, and they do it so very well. And it's my general thoughts. It's chef's kiss.
Yeah, I thought this was a wonderful, wonderful little, I'd say, like, suspense, thriller, kind of dark fantasy romp that, of course, has Guillermo del Toro written all over it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me just say right now, Guillermo, I see his name all over it, especially in the creature designs.
But speaking of the creature designs, my actual favorite thing, right, is whenever the faun is walking around, those aren't CGI legs. The guy is actually wearing like a bent stilt. So that's why it has that strange kind of walk to it, because the actual actor's walking like that.
Yeah, I will say integrating, the creature costumes like that, I wasn't able to, like, see and go, oh, so that's, like, on wires, right? That has, like... No, I was sitting there going, wait, how does that costume work? I'm kind of curious now. And so it's just interesting knowing that, bent stilts and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Del Toro has always had a really good mind for making movie monsters. And
Absolutely.
he really liked using practical because it really does help the feeling of the monster that it is in there, that it's real. And all the monster designs of this film are fucking amazing and
Hmm.
iconic. And iconic, which really helps make the movie immortal in its own way, especially with the use of practical effects.
Oh yes, and I mean I was also paying mention to one of the other monsters that I'm pretty sure people have seen pictures or clips of said monster, even if they have not heard of or even seen Pan's Labyrinth before, and that is the Pale Man, the man that literally has his eyes in his hands.
Yep, the child eater himself.
Yeah.
I have no evidence of that. We haven't seen him eat a child. Spoilers alert. Just saying.
We have seen his paintings of himself eating children
Fan art.
and his giant stack of children's shoes.
I mean, he's
Yeah, it's
collecting.
just it's glorified DeviantArt. We can't use that. We can't use implicit evidence.
Yeah, he's just got a bunch of four. So what?
Does a fairy count as a child? Because he eats one
Oh.
of those.
I'm pretty sure those are
Oh.
bugs according to the lore of this movie.
Yeah, actually, so I am curious. Are those just shape shifting bugs, or do the
So-
fairies turn into bugs to like obscure themselves in the normal world?
So it's the latter as opposed to the former. Essentially, one of the myths with a lot of fairies is that they do something called glamoring, which is using magic to change what they look like. So
Ah.
fairies in folklore, people who can't perceive them, they just don't see them there, or they'll see something else. That's why at the very end, the captain doesn't see her talking to anyone. She's just standing there.
Now, Harrison, I was getting very, very worried when you were actually saying glamoring, because when I heard the GL, I thought you were going to say the word glinching, and I had some horrific flashbacks to a a canceled Lego line called Galador, where
I have-
you swap around the action figure's limbs, and the act of doing so is called glinching.
I have never heard that term before.
No, that's some real
amazing.
horror.
That is some real horror. Oh
I'm gonna
god,
use
you
that
want a
word-
real horror show? Watch Galador. There was a whole show written for it too.
Ian,
God
just
help
for
us.
you, when we go on about talking about the next movie, I'm going to use that word. You're welcome.
Oh
Yeah,
god,
that-
no!
It fits.
That fits. No
It's
word
glinching time. Oh god, it's gonna be the new Morbin time now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just such a dirty sounding word too, glinching.
The night that Glinch stole Christmas. Classic. Classic.
You're a mean one, Mr. Glinch.
Okay, look. We could
Oh,
save
yeah.
the Christmas shit for later. Okay? Relax.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Let's not get too caught up in the
That's the
Galador
next
lore.
special. So-
we'll have the Galador lowdown on another episode because
Yeah.
god, it is fascinating just how much of a failure that line was. But yes, the creatures and just the general fantasy elements. Once again, very, very creative in their own right, and I don't really think you would be able to see a whole lot that's similar to it. You know, it very much is. Oh, that's Del Toro. You know,
Yep.
very few things are able to capture the same sort of look that you would see in a Del Toro movie.
But on a slight tangent, as far as what Sam had brought up about horrible things happening in the movie that it will show you, you get, just to kind of rapid fire through some of these, if you are wanting to watch the movie, please know that there is a lot of medical horror in this.
Yeah.
A lot. As in,
A
like, watching
lot.
someone sew their own face back up, watching someone get their leg amputated, a lethal injection at part of it, a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a miscarriage, well, almost a miscarriage, is rough at parts.
Yes. And I think just in terms of what happens to different characters, this film is surprisingly nasty. It does not pull its punches when it comes to having some pretty miserable moments occur.
Yes. I mean, in terms of what we're talking about, it's as Harrison would say, was saying, you know, I mean, you see everything. Like with the sewing part is a great example. Just him getting cut in general, him being the captain. Spoiler, 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 spoiler. In which you could see the side of his face like sliding off. Like you could see the slit. So it's shit like that. It's you look at that and you're like, damn, damn. First of all, the effects are great on it, which makes it even worse
Yep.
Oh yeah.
because you're like, oh yeah, no, that looks nasty. It's not like Friday the 13th or uh, Nightmare on Elm Street, in which it's goofy because the effects are old. These are good effects, which makes the gore just feel so much more.
Oh yeah. This movie is a beautiful evolution of physical in-camera practical effects,
Yep.
using multiple decades of just evolution in technique and just materials to really, really make it look like somebody had their cheek cut open.
Or one of the most infamous scenes in this movie is where, mild spoiler for the beginning, where two hunters are kind of stopped, believing that they are rebels, and one of them has their face bashed in with a wine bottle.
Yeah, that was the first scene that really gave you an idea of what kind of person the captain was.
Yep. Also, it's worth noting there is nothing violent in the movie up until that point.
No.
This is the intro to the kind of world that you're dealing with. Up until this point, it's just this childlike fantasy, moving out here, not liking your new father, and then just this.
Yeah, it it's a wake up call, and the way they do it so nonchalantly, without any big grandiose "this is about to happen" really helps because nothing
It
in
does.
this film, when it comes to the gore or the violence, is gratuitous. You can't look at anything going, it's a bit too much. It's like it never breaks your suspension of disbelief, and I think that wow, it makes everything hit so much harder.
That is true. I think as well, a good like two or three characters in this movie die explicitly from getting shot in the back.
Hmm. And they aren't gore fests.
No,
They
they're
get
not.
shot. When you get shot,
Exactly.
you don't explode.
Honestly, I think
Right.
most of the cast of this movie dies getting shot.
Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And usually it's it's a shot coming from the captain. The captain is responsible for most of the misery that other characters are put through.
Yeah, except for the very end, where spoilers, the captain asks for his last wishes to be honored, and they just tell him a no and then shoot him in the face.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Look, I'll be honest. Captain Vidal, which is, let's be honest, the antagonist of the film.
Yep.
It's the only one they really,
Absolutely.
really bring up as the antagonist of the film. This horrific, monstrous, just Nazi character in Spanish outfit. He really is a fantastic villain. He is brutal. He is just horrible. He thinks he's in the right. He quote unquote knows he's in the right. He's just awesome. He's awesome by being the most awful human being a person could be.
Yeah. Well,
Absolutely.
like, what makes him so much more awful, too, is the fact of how mechanical of a person he is. He has a
Which is
stopwatch on him at all times and will count down minutes as far as how long things are supposed to take.
yeah.
And let's also not forget about just how scummy his main goal is. Well, not just the goal, but how he just treats the person delivering his goal, which is he wants a son. He really, really, really wants a son to call his own, and through that, the main character Ophelia, she is constantly just seeing her mother being incredibly miserable, going through the pains of being pregnant, as horrific as that is from what I've been able to pick up over the years. But he almost treats her like more of a concubine than his actual wife. He almost always, when she shows any signs of, pain or, signs of having trouble with the process of being pregnant, his first worry is, what about my son?
Yeah.
And I think that speaks volumes to who he is as a person.
Yeah. I mean, he's so effective as the villain, and I really got to credit the direction for him and the actor himself, Monsieur Sergei Lopez.
Hmm.
Um, like I'd rather be in a room with the monsters, like the fantasy creatures, than with him. Because every time he popped up on screen, I got nervous
Honestly, yeah.
because he was capable of so much, and he was shown to do so much more than the actual, weird child eaters of the film. That I was like, oh shit, he's on screen. Someone's gonna get hurt.
Yeah, like the scene where he tortures someone because they have a stutter.
Yeah, he literally says, "Oh yeah, I'll let you go if you can count to 3 without stuttering." Here's the other thing. So the pale man,
Yes.
the one monster within the movie that, yes, is creepy, is most certainly unsettling to see when he has, also pops his eyeballs into his hands and is chasing Ophelia. The thing about that monster is you don't entirely get an idea of what he does aside from eat children. He eats them, but you don't get an idea of, well, how? Does he render them unconscious and then do that? Do whatever? The thing about the captain is you see that what he is capable of, what he has in store for people that give him shit. He is a monster. He is the actual horror movie monster.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's to the point where the captain has a rehearsed speech that he gives as he goes over torture implement by torture implement.
The thing is, yeah, the child eating is scary, but it's almost like cartoonish. Yeah,
Honestly.
what he does is not cartoonish. But honestly, we gotta start talking about anything else. He's great. I love him. But there's other
Yep.
really good aspects of the movie.
There
Um,
are.
Yes.
oh God, he steals every scene he's in. It's unfair. All the actors rocked it. Every single one. The person who I have her name in front of me. Gosh darn it. Ivana Baquero as Ophelia. Great child actor. A child
Oh,
actor can
absolutely.
a child actor can make or break your movie, and she thankfully made the movie. So she had to go through a lot of emotions. It just that whole situation is very stressful for a child. Just having a new father, let alone him being a fucking Spanish Gestapo, essentially,
Yeah.
Exactly.
defined in this fantasy world. And there's a lot to her character, and I loved it. It's just good. I'm gonna be honest, I'm just be gushing about the movie for the most part. In terms of, I'm just gonna get the negatives out of the way right now. You
Yep.
have to be prepared to watch this movie.
You do.
Definitely.
Yeah, you do.
You,
It
this is
was, yeah.
this is not Sleepy Hollow where you could just pop it on and it's like fall or whatever. You get the general vibe. This is a movie you gotta be like, am I ready for this shit? Because this shit's gonna be heavy.
And you would think it's like the dark fantasy stuff that would get you, but no, it's the real world shit that
Yeah.
is the most difficult to watch at times.
Yeah, if you're watching this with other people and you're about to spring it on them, yeah, unless you want them to be really surprised or maybe even offended, you have to hit them up a little bit, like, hey, this movie's gonna be a little bit heavy. You have to let them know. And it's
Now, of course, I have to say that maybe the next movie that we talk about even more so, but we'll get to that when we get to it.
yeah, but other than that, it's a really good film, a really thought invoking film, which is really good in a
It
horror movie.
is.
Would you describe this movie as horror? Actually, is the question.
I'd say real world horror in showing just how nasty people can be. I think
Harrison,
that's it.
your thoughts?
I would describe it as horror in the sense where it shows the awful side of war, really. It's one
And
of those
humans.
things that most movies that reference wars will show them in this positive light or show these grandiose combat scenes, and this just doesn't. People die, they get shot, they're dead. No grand celebration, just death.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't revel in it in the slightest.
Well, I will say that thankfully it's not all doom and gloom. There are several moments where there's at least little glimmers of hope, and although spoilers, unfortunately Ophelia does get shot by the captain. the captain gets unceremoniously killed off. Ophelia, after her brother is born, she runs off with him because the faun tells her to show up in the labyrinth with him, and the faun instructs her, okay, I need his blood, so hand him over and I'll just get a few drops, and she's repulsed by that. She's not going to allow that, and the faun's like, oh, come on, I told you to just do whatever I tell you to do without, having a fuss and stuff like that. And, she's talking to him, and then the captain shows up, and he sees Ophelia, but he doesn't see the faun. So it's one of those cases of communicating, oh, well, is the fantasy world even real and stuff like that? And fucking he grabs her brother and just shoots her, and she falls over and starts bleeding out. And when he leaves the labyrinth, the rebels surround him. They take away his son, and he looks at his watch one last time, and he says, oh yeah, I want you to tell my son the hour and minute that I died. And they say, no, we're not going to do that. You know what is going to happen? He's not even going to know your name. And they just shoot him right there. And I'm just like, no, that's fitting. That's fitting. That's exactly how he should go out. He shouldn't go out, I don't know, being trapped in the fantasy world, being eaten alive by whatever, fantasy monster. No, he just gets unceremoniously killed off. Because you know what? That's what he gets for his nastiness. He's just forgotten. And I think that's the main thing, because I don't know how you guys read his whole watch thing with him keeping track of time, but I read that as the captain only has so much time in his life, especially considering he's in the middle of the war.
Yep.
So he wants a son to essentially be his living legacy, and he lives every minute as if he's going to eventually die. Hence why he's so gung-ho in some of the combat scenes and stuff like that. And so
the other interesting thing too, right, is they mention earlier on that watch is his father's watch. And he knew exactly when his father died, and you see him fix it in the very beginning of the movie. So that way he could then use it himself to record when he dies for his son.
Precisely.
So it's this sort of heritage of how long has this been happening, and just for it to end abruptly because of him being an awful person.
Oh, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I got a question for both of you.
Yes.
Do you believe that the fantasy world presented in the movie is actually real? Or is it more of a coping mechanism for the child? Or do you think it's just there for the movie? You know what I mean? Like, it's just Del Toro putting it in here, not necessarily to lighten the mood, but I don't know how to finish that one, honestly.
I have a specific take on it, but I want to hear Ian's take first.
I think my take is it sort of takes the usual approach to most fantasy worlds and movies like this, where it is a world that only shows itself to the people who sort of look for that kind of stuff, who have that sort of imagination and are open-minded and stuff. And people like the captain or Ophelia's mother, who have, been living in this very cynical, negative mindset of the world that the fantasy elements don't show themselves to, because they don't have the same mind that Ophelia does. And I guess, maybe jog my memory, but that weird little, tree thing that Ophelia puts under
the mandrake.
Her mother's... The mandrake, yes, the mandrake. So, the thing about the mandrake, if I'm not mistaken, the faun just literally pulls that out of his back pocket and just says, oh yeah, put this underneath your mother's bed. I'm assuming that then that means the mandrake is something that the faun literally pulled out of the fantasy world, and considering that the captain quite literally was able to grab it and see it, there's at least some semblance of the fantasy world crossing over.
Yes.
But only when it shows itself.
Now, there's an interesting thing too with this, right? There's evidence in the movie itself that the fantasy world's real. Because you can hand wave away the mandrake and go, yeah, no, she found it in the woods, imagine this whole thing up. But the thing that you can't, they have her locked in her room. She's not allowed to leave her room. The chalk door.
Exactly. That was the other thing I was going to get to. The chalk door is still a thing. That's what allows her to escape. I mean, if somehow people want to, like, really reach and say, oh, well, she found another way out. She went through a window or something. It's very difficult to be able to believe that.
Yeah, especially with her drawing the door with chalk on her wall.
Uh-huh. Unless she was secretly a demolitions expert.
Yeah, and then leaving the chalk in the captain's room as she makes her escape.
Yeah, she was given that chalk, too, so that's another example of the fantasy world crossing over because the captain also saw the chalk.
And picks it up and breaks it.
Exactly. So, I think, yeah, the fantasy world, to me anyway, is real. It just only shows itself to the people that it chooses.
Harrison,
Yes?
your take? Any more to add on your take?
Not really, no. I mean, the movie tries to be really ambiguous, but you know for a fact that the fantasy world is just sort of a thing that you see if you look for it, because the ending, like, speech is explicitly that. That you can still see Ophelia in the world if you know where to look for, as if flower then blooms.
I'm going to go with the idea that it's a fake. It's a hashtag coping mechanism.
All
Okay.
right.
I think that kind of fits with the more realistic tone of the movie.
I get
And,
you.
and with the whole idea that these things exist if you look for it, I think it would be more appropriate to say these things exist if you believe they do. Which,
Okay.
in a way, yes. I mean, if you believe anything hard enough, it exists to you. I mean, personally,
True.
I mean that's the way I interpret it. And personally, I like to believe it's all real and that she's rocking it as the queen of the underworld because that's dope as fuck and way happier than that.
Right.
But you know, it's really both ways. You know, it's really hard to tell, and I think it's more leaning towards it's fake, but it's happy in the way that in this fakeness she found her happiness and everything still worked out, and this fantasy exists as long as you believe in it and look for it. But yeah, I think the interpretation can lead to both ways.
And hey, it's open to interpretation. That's the beauty of it.
Yep.
Which means it's more to think about, which is always good when a movie gets you to think.
Yes.
Even a little
No,
bit.
it really
Absolutely.
is.
Closing thoughts, I mean, I would most certainly recommend people at least once watch Pan's Labyrinth. Under the, mindset of, yes, it's going to be a bit rough in certain scenes. Characters are going to die.
Yeah.
And they're also going to horribly, horribly die.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just gonna state it again. It's a very, very, very good movie. It's better if you're in the mind for it, and honestly, it might even be better on a second watch through when you're more prepared for those aspects. I wouldn't call it a casual movie. I wouldn't say it's casual.
Yeah.
Because it's thought invoking. It's not a super casual movie.
Yep.
But I'd still say it's easier than some movies just to pop on. In terms of if it's a Halloween movie, that's a little bit tougher. If I could properly say it's like, oh yeah, it's Halloween night. Let's put on Pan's Labyrinth.
Well, I'd say at least in the design of the fantasy world, considering like the fawn, for example, the fawn does not have the most visually, bewildering or appealing look. He still kind of looks a little off, which granted works because throughout the movie you're constantly questioning, well, should Ophelia actually trust the fawn? Because he looks a little he seems a little creepy here and there. And then, I mean, the Pale Man, especially, that just screams, dark fantasy,
Yep.
sort of, creepy, monster design. Would I say that maybe I could have gone with a few more moments of actually being in the fantasy world and stuff like that? Sure. But I think that would have had the runtime go a bit longer, and I'm not sure if it would need that, per se.
I would love something, though, that has more of this world's fantasy elements, because they're fantastic.
Oh, they are.
I don't know, some sort of thing set in the same setting would be really nice, but odds of that happening are relatively low.
Probably for the best.
Apparently, Guillermo del Toro did say he had plans for a sequel, but nothing came of it.
I don't think it really needs a sequel, though, to be honest. I think a sequel would probably just undermine a lot of what this movie did.
I need more.
The only thing I could think of is if it's another story with another set of characters completely unrelated to Ophelia and her family, but the same fantasy world, and it sort of studies the characters a little differently and how their relation to the fantasy world is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where it's a similar premise, but with different characters and a different arc. Because then that gives an excuse to be in the fantasy world a little bit more, and I would like to see more of that.
Exactly. I just love a movie that would basically be someone venturing into that fantasy world.
Yeah. Or even just having more time in it and stuff like that. Like, I still like the idea that there's still this very strong connection between the fantasy world and the real world, but I would like to see more of the fantasy world. It just had such a unique design to it that it's a shame that we don't get to explore it as much.
No, that is true.
Yeah.
But there is a setting that we get to fully explore the interworkings of how its monsters work. Very much so.
Yeah. Oh, Lord, this next film.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't say it had me in stitches, but this one's the spooky one. This one's the horrific one. This one's the one that, because of my work schedule and stuff like that, I had to watch at like 9:45, 10 o'clock, and I really didn't want to. Oh, Sammy boy, this is your pick.
Yeah, no, it's look, this one's kind of cheating. I'll be honest, this one's kind of a fucking cheat movie. Yeah, because everyone's fucking heard of The Thing.
Of course.
I almost feel kind of bad picking it because it's so easy. Who doesn't watch this movie and go like, "Damn, yeah, no, that's The Thing, baby." I love it. Look, I'm not gonna cut around the bush. It's one of the greatest horror movies ever made.
Yep.
I know that's not a very hot topic opinion. That's not gonna make some people angry or rustle some jimmies.
Yeah, and I mean, you kind of need at least one of these kinds of movies, which is like, oh yeah, this is like the higher echelon of horror. And plus, I mean, like we were already talking about, these previous two movies, they're not necessarily scary. They're scary in different ways, but they're not like scary. They're not like foreboding. They're not horrifying or anything like that. They're not the kind of movies that necessarily, oh yeah, I'm going to be losing sleep now because it's kind of spooking me out. This one is actually horrifying for many reasons.
Yeah, in terms of the like more fantastical reasons compared to like Pan Labyrinth, which is grounded. You know what? It's a weird comparison, but I'm going to throw it out there. So, The Matrix came out in the 90s. And The Matrix was obviously super successful, and it created this little zeitgeist where people were wondering, like, oh man, what if we exist in the Matrix? Like, this, it's very thought-provoking. This is The Thing is kind of like that in terms of horror. Like, you watch The Thing, and instead of, like Matrix, and you think, oh my god, am I real? You watch and you're like, should I trust my neighbor? Should I trust my brother? I haven't seen him in a minute.
Yeah. Especially if they pop back up and you're the only two people in the room.
Mm-hmm. So, quick premises for this movie. You have a group of researchers in Antarctica, America, God bless, USA only, Team America, let's go. And they're doing some basic research up there when all of a sudden they come across this dog being chased down by a helicopter with some Norwegians in it. And the Norwegians are yelling at the Americans. Obviously, they're screaming in Norwegian, so no one can understand it because Norwegian is a made-up language. They're getting a little scuffle. The Norwegian dies, and they keep the dog. And insanity ensues. Little hijinks, little tomfoolery.
Yeah. Yes. As it turns out, that's not a dog.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Fun fact, actually. The Norwegians are actually yelling at them in Norwegian. like the entire warning of what that is and how to kill it.
Got all the Norwegian
And
audiences were like, "Hey, whoa, don't spoil, bro."
Yeah, pretty
I think it was a
much.
good idea not putting subtitles either.
Yeah, no, that's exactly why they did it because they didn't want to
Oh,
spoil it for the
exactly.
American audience.
Right. Imagine like this movie coming out and there's just one person that happened to have seen it in like Canada or North America and they happen to have spoken Norwegian and they're just sitting there going, wait, what? Hang on, what? Wait a minute.
So, quick synopsis of the actual monster for this film itself. The Thing is an alien that crash landed super long ago in its history. And what it does, what makes it so scary, is the fact that it will infect someone, take over their body, and assimilate them. So it looks exactly like the person they assimilate and acts like the person they assimilate. So the whole premise of the horror of this movie is the team slowly being taken over, and you don't know who to trust. And that really is where the strength of the movie really shines, is in this paranoia.
Yes.
So, general thoughts, my peeps?
Well, I'll say one thing. This is the prototype of Among Us.
Among Us.
Okay, both of you can fucking leave.
Oh,
I knew
come
that
on!
was gonna pop up eventually, but like,
Hey, hey Sam.
yeah.
Look up the Thing movie poster for me.
Okay, looking it up now.
All right.
Uh-huh.
Do you see him?
Fuck you.
Do you see the Amogus? It's the Amogus, Sam! He's sitting there!
God damn it.
He's just got arms this time around.
No, but the Thing movie poster is actually really, really iconic.
It is. It gives a very good idea of what you're in for, but at the same time doesn't spell it out either. It doesn't, and I like that. And here's the interesting thing. Obviously, a lot of the just horrifying moments come from the thing itself. First off, to give some context, when I was saying earlier that, yeah, I had to watch this at like 10 o'clock at night, dead of night, and I'm sitting there going like, yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be one of those movies that spooks me. So I called up my buddy Chris. I'm like, hey, Chris, so, you know how there's a watch party function on Amazon Prime? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, well, I have to watch the thing for the podcast that I do. And, well, it's 10 o'clock at night. I could really use your help, buddy. So we watched it together, and dear Lord, it helped because I was immediately not feeling right within the first few seconds of the movie where it opens on a starfield, and you just see this little flying saucer come on through. And it obviously passes by the camera, and it cuts to this wide shot of it, going towards Earth, burning up in the atmosphere, and then just disappearing. And you get the title card, John Carpenter's, and you're like, oh, okay, well, what's going on here? And then all of a sudden, you get the title of The Thing burning into the picture as if it's like made of plasma. And just these few minutes, I was already just getting chills, like, okay. It's hard to pinpoint it right now, but I am already not feeling right. And the thing about the flying saucer flying towards the camera and then going past and towards the Earth, it doesn't have like this big roaring, swoosh effect like in, say, Star Wars or even Predator, because Predator had a very similar opening where a spaceship flew past the camera and towards Earth. It just sort of very gently goes past, and just how, like, nonchalant it is, and then just going towards there. And knowing full well, yes, it's an alien that's going to be attacking humans, it already spells out, yeah, whoever comes across that, they're fucked. They are fucked. The world, potentially, is fucked. And here we are. John Carpenter's The Thing. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. You're in for a ride. What a fucking ride this was.
Harrison, your general thoughts.
I am a very big fan of this type of movie. I'm going to be real with you. Because It's the sort of movies that you can just rewatch again and again, try to find little signs that you didn't notice before, like one person behaving off at part of it and going, that's why they converted at this part. They were already it back in this scene and that kind of stuff. Like there's all these little tiny
Yeah.
details.
Oh yeah, and I mean, once we get into the nitty gritty, there's actually some interesting, you know, thematic stuff as well as commentary too, in terms of some of the things that they worked into the story that I kind of only thought about after I saw it. And I'm like, you know what? That's actually kind of interesting. And obviously, I read a lot into the behind the scenes stuff because if we can start anywhere with getting into it, the practical effects. This is a masterclass in it. This is
It
a
is.
masterclass in physical puppeteering and just general practical effects. Like, dear Lord, there's a reason why the scenes where the thing reveals itself and turns into these just horrific, nightmarish, like, amalgamations of limbs and organs and stuff like that is because it all looks so real. It is beautifully disgusting, and I have to say that I couldn't sit still for the rest of the movie after the infamous dog transformation scene.
Try to eat a bologna sandwich after that, I dare you.
Exactly, especially when it does the flower petal face thing, where the
Oh,
literal
flower.
snout of the fucking dog splits open like a flower, and it's bony, meshy like face on the inside. Fucking hell. I mean, that particular scene was, already hard to watch because, it's a bunch of dogs getting assimilated and killed and stuff like that, And I am one of those wimps that I'm just like, oh no, not the dogs.
So, as to why I picked this movie specifically, honestly, man, this is going to sound a little, again, hoity-toity. But when it comes to horror movies, this is a perfect example of what I like to call the elevated horror movie. The one that goes just a little, not even a little, but beyond, above and beyond. And the core of it is really the strength of the characters and how realistic this situation feels. Now, obviously, it's a space alien horror movie. Realism is going to be a little out the window, a little out there, because it's a fucking space alien, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I watch Alex Jones every now and then, and Psychic Lobsters, all that. When I say realism, is the characters in the movie aren't fucking stereotype idiots. You know what I mean? They
Mm-hmm.
they don't split up because because they can. They split up because they have to. For the most part, everything they do is intelligent and what I believe a real human fucking being would do. And that's where the movie really shines. Is because the human element of the movie is intelligent and competent for the most part. As competent as human beings can be. It makes everything else better. It makes the villain more menacing because if the human beings are competent and the monster's still winning, that's scary. That's a lot scarier than fucking a bunch of stupid teens going out, getting high, and fucking in a
Exactly.
graveyard in the Indian burial yard, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just better for it. And the score, the atmosphere, the characters, it's just everything, man. Everything about it is just a little bit better than an average horror movie.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I can say one other thing that really works in this, the score done by the ever iconic Ennio Morricone, fantastic. And it's actually the score in particular that when it came on, nothing is necessarily happening on screen per se, but it still gave me chills. It made me think, oh, I did this. This feels very uncomfy. I am scared straight right now just because the score is very, very unnerving to listen to.
Harrison, thoughts?
It's score kind of really helps build the suspense for it.
Mhm.
Oh, yes.
because that's the thing that a lot of movies kind of forget sometimes is music is really key to selling a scene. If you don't have the right music tones for a scene, it doesn't fit properly. There's actually this video I saw where someone took the music playing in like James Bond scenes and removed it, and instead just put the sort of music that plays in, like TLC shows when people meet over it, and full suspense out the window. It's not even suspenseful in the slightest. It's just like two people meeting and chatting it up at a bar. Like, music is really, really key to what you're selling, and the thing does it very well.
It absolutely does. Because, I mean, it shows what the thing is capable of. It is capable of freaking splitting open whatever it's assimilated, and, like, splitting open its head, and it becomes a giant mouth. I mean, someone's chest bursts open like a giant mouth and chops off someone's arms. I mean, it does all kinds of things. And it's just horrific because you just don't know what kind of shape it's going to take. And what I find interesting is that you never actually get an idea of what the thing could potentially look like before it's assimilated anything. Because for all you know, it could just be an amalgamation of flesh and stuff like that. But what it does do is that it takes on the shape of multiple things that it's assimilated. It creates some just very creative looking, but also nightmarish, flesh abominations. And again, it's just... that's half the horror right there. It is horrific to look at. And for anyone with a weak stomach, I will most certainly say, definitely do not watch this if you have a weak stomach. Or just don't have a thing for gore, because it is a tough watch to sit through if that's the case. I mean, I'm normally one where I don't have a problem with gore, but if, like, it sits on it for a while, I'm going to have a problem. And, yeah, this was disgusting at times. I will say, for me, things were downhill after the dog scene. Like, the other scenes where the thing was transforming into, like, these just horrific, abominations and stuff like that, it was still very gross and hard to look at times, but the dog scene, for me, like, it wasn't as bad after that. I wouldn't say that, it's not as scary. No, it's still scary, but it became a little easier for me.
No, I definitely get that.
But the tension still held itself fantastically, because again, it's that just distrust amongst the people involved that really gets me and kept me like going, well, maybe something's just around the corner and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes it's a bit risky if you have a movie that takes itself very seriously, because if it doesn't work, then it looks silly on accident.
Yeah.
This is a good example of a movie that takes itself very seriously, does it right, and it makes it way more intense for it.
I think, like, with it taking itself seriously, one of my favorite little details is where it copies parts of things that it has eaten.
Mm-hmm.
But during the dog scene, the only sort of things you can infer that's eaten before then, besides the dogs, are like something with tentacles and crabs.
Mm-hmm.
That's like that's it. That's all you know that it for certain had got to.
Yeah.
Which means it could have been much worse if it got other things that weren't crabs.
Well, it's funny because I'll kind of go into the whole question of I mean, like, how much has it absorbed before? Like, what kind of creatures has it assimilated before? But I'll save that for later because I found some interesting I guess supplementary material in the forms of like extra media revolving around the thing that I can go into detail on. But first, I wanted to just kind of go into some of those thematic stuff that I was talking about. And one interesting thing that I found later on is that the general mistrust and constant like turning against each other that the research team has in this movie is very reminiscent of the kind of paranoia that multiple countries had during the Cold War, with like the Red Scare, and I mean even in America with McCarthyism and stuff like that. Of should I trust my neighbor? Is my neighbor potentially a communist? And I think when you look at it from that perspective, it's actually a beautiful, beautiful little case study of how humans aren't always willing to lower their guard, and they are more willing to just kill each other out of sheer fear of, oh, well, if I kill him before he kills me, I'll be safe. And I mean, that's explored beautifully because some people do die in this movie, and it turns out they weren't the thing. They were just overly paranoid. It's interesting to think about, well, when you really do think about it, this whole situation became what it was because no one trusted one another. No one worked together. No one set down boundaries of like, okay, let's just do this, do that, and not get up each other's asses on this. Because you have to think, if they were willing to work together more, which granted could have raised the risk of the thing, you know, possibly assimilating all of them, but you also have to think, like, possibly this thing could have all been avoided if they just worked together and trust each other more. And especially when you look at it from, you know, that whole Cold War paranoia, I think it does add quite a few layers to it. And sort of has like this tinge of tragedy to it. Because, I mean, people are being locked out in maintenance sheds, people are having to be strapped to chairs, while others go like, yeah, I'm going to take your blood and I'm going to do a test and we'll do you last because I have a feeling you're it. You're the thing. You know, and it only just riles people up more and causes them to just be maybe the reason why the thing was so willing to just assimilate all of them was because, well, it's an alien. It doesn't recognize humans. You know, what was stopping the thing from maybe, I don't know, taking a moment to somehow use one of the guys as a means of communicating and saying, hey, so like, what's up? Where am I? But you have to think with how aggressive the humans were, which understandably, seeing what they saw, perhaps they had a bit of a right to, but I mean, you also have to think, maybe the thing could have also avoided escalating the situation if had the ability to communicate or do something or recognize, yeah, like, maybe don't assimilate them. Because you actually never do get an idea of how intelligent the thing is, because yes, it's able to perfectly mimic humans and behave like one for the most part, and hell, it's even smart enough to do things like tamper with machinery and even get rid of a bunch of the team's blood samples. You know, and never tries communicating of its own accord and saying, yeah, I'm the thing and I want to, like, you know, talk. It's this hostility on both sides that I think escalated the situation.
I'd say that the core thing with these sorts of movies, as far as any sort of alien assimilation plot lines, is usually that up till a set point, the alien itself, its sole purpose is just gather more mass. It doesn't really think the same way. It can understand, yes, like how certain processes work, copy things, but does it really get why these things happened? It's this sort of uncanny mimicry of what life really is for a lot of people or things in the world, and it's supposed to be unsettling because it's off.
And I mean, granted, some people could say, oh, well, the reason why you never fully understand the thing is because it's just supposed to be a monster movie villain and stuff like that, and so it has to kill people, but I don't know.
Just a quick interjection. I mean, something that makes it just a little bit above like a normal slasher villain is despite the fact that we really ultimately don't know much about it. It never talks for itself. You know, it never goes to these guys and explain what its, you know, thoughts are, or tries to talk it out, or hey man, what's your feelings about me assimilating you? You know?
Mm-hmm.
But it has intelligence. First of all, in its mimicry, it perfectly mimics someone to the point where you don't know until it's a little bit too late. Like, there's never a point where they look at one of their allies and say, wait a minute, you're acting funny. They always have to find out in a different way than that. They always have to find out, like, oh, it's through the blood. You know, when they do the blood test is a really good example. but it's never an emotional thing. They're never like, wait a minute, this feels wrong. You don't feel like the person. And it honestly
Yeah.
makes it even scarier because you don't know. And it does all these, espionage things, making it impossible for them to, fully kill it, or know who it, know which one it is. And it thinks ahead. Like at the very end, it knows it's lost, so it's attempting to freeze itself so someone else can find it. Its intelligence is shown subtly and in a more organic, natural way.
And again, I mean, maybe kind of like what I was talking about, I kind of come from a perspective that the reason why the thing never takes a moment to try and communicate for itself is, it is intelligent, but it chooses not to do that, or doesn't have the capacity to. Humans, for example, have the capacity to talk with one another, to understand one another, but they don't always choose that. They choose instead to destroy each other. And I think it was intentional that the thing never does that, because it's supposed to reflect that maybe it's not so different from humans. And it is an interesting point to bring up, because one of the offshoots of media of the thing, aside from like games and other stuff, which by the way, there is a PS2 game for the thing that is actually kind of fun from what I've seen.
Yeah, I beat it. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. It does its best to attempt to capture the paranoia from the movie, but unfortunately, just I guess due to like being an old PS2 game, it doesn't really go all the way with it. But it's still it's a nice little fun little game.
Yeah,
Bit
I get
difficult.
that.
You could definitely tell.
Yes. I
You could
heard it was pretty difficult.
you could tell it's before Resident Evil 4 in terms of gameplay and everything like that. But that's a topic for another day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the extra things in media, and I'll just kind of go over this before we wrap up and go on to our next topic. There was a short story based around the thing, written by Peter Watts, and this one's interesting because it's called The Things, plural. And the reason it's called that is actually because it is a short story written from the perspective of the alien. And I actually decided, you know what? Short story? It's online? Hey, I'll check it out. It sounds interesting. And I went in thinking that, it's just going to be like a beat-by-beat retelling of what happened in the movie, but from the perspective of the alien. Oh, Lord. No, it's a lot more than that. I actually think recontextualizes the movie in a way. And I'm not normally one for, reading books as a means of, like, enhancing a movie. Star Wars is a bad contender for that sometimes. But this short story was interesting because it actually provides a decent amount of lore behind the thing. And the thing is interesting because it apparently considers itself an ambassador, a missionary, a soldier against entropy, because it literally refers to its assimilation ability as the communion, where apparently its process of assimilating other life forms as like this act of necessary evolution, given that it can change the physiology of whatever it assimilates. And when it crash lands on Earth, it actually assumes that the humans are part of that process of assimilation for the sake of fighting entropy, evolution, and stuff like that, and just enhancing their biomass. But it actually becomes horrified when it finds out that they actually can't shapeshift like it can, and they actually reject the assimilation. And so it thinks of humans as like this thinking cancer that it has to, quote-unquote, save by assimilating and forcefully evolving. And it is a chilling short read. I recommend that everybody check it out because it adds a lot more context to the monster. I wouldn't say it's necessary, because kind of like what I was talking about, once again, in the short story, it makes no attempt to try and communicate with the humans, even though it possibly has the ability to, because it assumes, they're a thinking cancer. They're this suffering, organism that I have to, morph, to change, to alter their physiology and stuff like that. Because again, it's sort of, much like the humans, thinking entirely from paranoia. So, yeah, interesting short read. I really recommend people try it out. You can find it basically anywhere online. It's free to read. And yeah, it's just solid.
No, I get
But
you.
yeah,
I get you.
closing thoughts on The Thing.
Good as fuck.
Yeah, it's good. It's fantastic. I would recommend it only to people, though, that can stomach the just grossness of The Thing, of course. If you're not one for gore, maybe give it a pass. But if you can stomach it, hey, it's worth it.
I personally enjoyed it. It's up there as far as one of my favorite horror movies. Because it's high up there. I like the atmosphere to it. I like the sort of claustrophobic feel it gives. Because that's the sort of thing I always like with any sort of alien horror movies, is they feel very claustrophobic, which always is a plus for me, because it really immerses you in there.
I mean, I mostly the same boat as Harrison. It's one of my favorite horror movies. One of my favorite movies in general. It really scratches that itch of a sci-fi horror. And like I said, it's elevates itself with its better characters and just overall concepts and ideas and originality. Despite it being a remake.
Yeah,
Um,
of course.
and I think this is a perfect example of the movies. Like, the kids are asleep. Again, you're with your buds. You're like, hey guys, you want to watch a fucking horror movie?
Throw
And
on
this
the
is gonna be
thing.
the movie you whip out. Like this is the horror movie you watch. And
Absolutely.
so, okay, which one of these three are your guys' favorites, though?
That's a tough one for me. It really is. Because these are all really solid movies that I liked for different reasons. I will say, I think if I had to rank them, Pan's Labyrinth might be third, but frankly, that's only because it's not the most, spooky, in my opinion. It doesn't have quite as many, Halloween elements, but I would still say it belongs in the criteria of something that you could watch around Halloween. Purely because when the dark fantasy stuff does show up, it's nice. It's spooky, it's unnerving, and overall just solid.
Mm-hmm.
It's just tough choosing between Sleepy Hollow or The Thing, because The Thing, it got me. It really did, but I also just really liked Sleepy Hollow as a movie. So I guess I'll say, as a movie, I preferred Sleepy Hollow, just because I thought the filmmaking, lighting, and production design was fantastic, along with the cast. But The Thing, it's just such a masterclass in horror that I think as a Halloween movie and just a horror movie, I will say The Thing was the best.
I get you. I get you. As far as horror elements go, The Thing is up there for me. For general movies, I do really love Pan's Labyrinth.
And that is understandable. It's on all cylinders in many areas.
For me, I think when it comes in the spirit of Halloween, I'm going to say my favorite in terms of what I think of a Halloween movie. I would probably go with Sleepy Hollow. Is probably the most Halloween and the most I could casually watch. But when I think of my favorite horror movie, it's going to be The Thing.
Okay.
Pan's Labyrinth, I can't even. The problem with Pan's Labyrinth, it's a good movie. It's a fantastic movie. It's just, I don't know. In terms of these three, what I'd want to see in terms of a horror movie and a Halloween movie, probably The Thing. Not probably, definitely The Thing. Love Pan's Labyrinth.
I getcha.
And of course there's bias in the fact that I chose The Thing, obviously, but I really can't emphasize that enough on how good and how much Pan's Labyrinth surprised me with how visceral it was.
Yep.
As gory as gory as The Thing was, and how still yet tasteful it was because it kind of fit the whole thing going on there. The gore, and the there was more oomph in Pan's Labyrinth because of its more down to the earth feeling. But it's a bit of a toss-up between Pan's Labyrinth and The Thing. They're both really fucking good. And in terms of a movie I'd watch before going trick-or-treating, it would definitely be Sleepy Hollow, though.
I guess it brings up the question, though, right? What would be a Halloween movie that you wouldn't watch?
Mainly, if I may also just point out, because you just think that it's not quite what people crack it up to be, really. Basically, what are your choices for movies that a bunch of people, like, almost religiously will watch and say, oh yeah, it's the best Halloween movie, it's great, but you honestly find it to be just a little overrated? Because, to me, I'm just going to say it, I may or may not have put this topic down as something that we cover, because I just wanted to just have an excuse to put it out there on the podcast around Halloween time. I can't stand Hocus Pocus. I can't stand Hocus Pocus. And I feel like I'm on another planet when I say that. Because just everyone loves Hocus Pocus.
Yeah,
and I mean, I get it. It's like literally taking place during Halloween. I get that. But, like, you know, people say, oh, well, it's just a good Halloween movie. You know, it's not the greatest movie ever, but it's like a good Halloween movie. Where it's just like, well, I guess, considering it's just taking place on Halloween and there's witches, but I don't know, man. I'm sitting there, I'm like, eh? And then, you know, some people say that it's like a good B movie, like a good guilty pleasure movie, because, yeah, it's a bit stupid at times. But I'm sitting there going like, I don't really think it's stupid enough. I actually think it could have maybe been more stupid. Because frankly, again, I think what really made it, you know, not go all the way with being like super like, ooh, in terms of like spooky or like even, you know, kind of pushing the envelope for kids movies like what I would maybe expect DreamWorks to do, is it's a Disney movie. And Disney is not going to go all the way with certain things, you know? I mean, there's that reoccurring, like, virgin joke, which, first off, if I'm not mistaken, main character's, like, 15, 16 or something like that? So
yes.
How he should really be, like, taunted for that is a little weird.
No, it's strange. It's strange. I'd say it's much in the same vein of saying it's a Halloween movie, like if I say Batman is a Halloween movie, because it takes place around Halloween.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, I've kind of gone on a tangent with Hocus Pocus a bit, but I mean, for you guys, what do you think is a overrated Halloween movie?
Insidious.
Oh, okay.
Insidious and The Conjuring. People like worship these movies as like the modern horror masterpieces, and I'm just like, just another ghost story.
Yeah, like I like things like The Exorcist, but a lot of the other ghost movies that I've tried to watch, they just haven't stuck for me at all. And it's just me stuck here going, this is it? Like, you have Paranormal Activity, which was hyped up when it originally came out, which is just like watching someone's sleeping for fair chunks of it. Insidious is in that similar vein there. Scary Movie, if you count it.
No, that's comedy. Nice try.
It's not to me. That movie's awful. It's horrifically awful.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't know how I even watched that one. But or what is that slasher movie? Which one is it? Hold on. It's coming to me. I remember now. It's the Jason stuff as well as the Michael Myers stuff, because they're
Friday
very
the 13th.
They're very, very samey.
They're very samey. They're not that scary.
No, not really. And I guess to me, I can also kind of lump into that, because slashers, they have to do something unique and not be predictable for me. Like, I recently watched the original Candyman, and I thought that was pretty alright, because that was different. It's
pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is pretty nice, and it's also got some interesting commentary that was neat for the 90s and whatnot, so it also has that angle, too. It's just, Friday the 13th for me, unless it's one of the ones that's, like, really goofy with how, you know, Jason goes about killing people, then I'll watch it.
Are you talking about Jason X?
Yes!
That movie's a fucking masterpiece. Don't talk shit about Jason X. It's so different. It's in space.
I'm trying to remember one of the other Friday the 13th, because there was another one where it just went full cheese.
Where he
and I
fights Freddy Krueger.
I mean, that one's also
Again,
great. That one's also
masterpiece.
great. I like that one.
The one you're
I
probably
really
thinking,
do.
Though, I mean, he goes to Manhattan, which is fucking awful.
Oh, yes. Yes. That
Yeah,
one. The
no,
one where
it's-
people joked that he had, like, teleportation powers or something like that.
Oh, okay, that's most of them, but
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I
where he
mean, yeah.
just-
That one in particular was what really hammered home that joke.
mm-hmm.
Or does he literally just have teleportation powers? I can't remember. Those
He
movies
does
are so
not.
inconsistent.
He does not, because his whole power is basically he just has a knife and will just walk towards them. It's just a casual walk towards them with a
And
with
it's
a
also
hockey
very
mask and
difficult to
cleaver.
kill him, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, like I said, the only one that really matters is Jason X, because that thing's in fucking space.
That
Yeah.
is the hottest take I've ever got on Friday the 13th.
That Jason X is
Disregard the other
awesome.
movies, just Jason X.
Yeah, I mean, come on, dude. Have you seen Uber Jason? I'm pretty sure it's
all
not hot.
right, all right. I want your next take then. Have you
Okay.
seen Hellraiser?
Yes. Why?
I have
Is
two.
Is your favorite one for Hellraiser also the space one?
What are you talking about? There's
Wait, there's a
only-
space one?
Well, not the
only-
space one, not the space one, but the giant magical hotel where the entire hotel is a puzzle box.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. There's no Hellraiser after the second one. People keep trying to convince me otherwise that there's like apparently 3 to like 11, but I think they're fucking silly. They're being silly, but there's no.
I mean, for me, I also just kind of go with the idea that there's at least only one movie, because I think that's the only one I can stomach.
And the reason
I
I
get
say
you.
Hellraiser's in one of those, subgenres of horror, which is body horror, and I made an exception for The Thing, because The Thing was obviously a very famous movie. Maybe not
Yep.
when it came out, but after it got, like, an audience and stuff like that. And it very much did transform, the genre. It's just... Body horror is one of those things where The Thing is... I guess it does it in moderation to where I can stomach it, because I'm really not one for body horror. Body horror is the one thing where I'm like, I'm not gonna sit through this.
I get that. I get that. It's one of those things where you gotta know it's gonna be there going in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, especially because later body horror movies, I wouldn't entirely say just Hellraiser, but like later body horror movies, that's kind of the only takeaway that you get is like, oh yeah, the effects for the body horror stuff was like really good, and I'm like, yeah, but like I don't like body horror. That's the
I
problem.
feel your imaginary finger pointing at the Saw franchise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's like it's very tortury too. I'm not a
Yeah.
huge fan of Saw, to be honest. It's just I don't know, almost like too sadistic in a way, and I just feel it gets to the point of gratuity.
Anyways, what's another movie franchise that we can shame people who watch?
I mean, all of the Paranormal Activity stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I guess in a way, this is more of like a singular movie, but I mean,
Yes.
the later movies are kind of bad. Blair Witch does not quite hold up as it used to.
That's true. Blair Witch, though, the thing with I've done a lot of research into it in my free time because I was curious. They didn't really tell the actors what they were exactly doing for a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, when the girl is like losing her mind at the end, she genuinely thought that they had unknowingly signed up for an actual like we're gonna kill you and record it like snuff film
Jesus,
because they didn't
Christ.
tell them.
Fuck that.
So that's the thing about Blair Witch is it was such a low budget and it was so sketchy seeming to the actors themselves, and they weren't told a lot of the details. It's why the monster doesn't even show up, because they didn't point the camera at it because they weren't told anything.
Oh yeah, and I mean, when Blair Witch came out, I'm not going to deny, I'm almost certain that people were scared by it, and it was pretty frightening, especially because it still does feel like a bunch of people, out in the woods, and that is still a strength it has to this day.
Yeah.
It's just that's kind of most of what you get, aside from them reacting to noises and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
today, that doesn't really hold up. It's the same thing of like how back when film was first becoming a thing, people got startled by a train coming towards the camera and thinking that the train was going to come out of the screen that it was being projected on. It's in that same vein where it's just like, well, nowadays, no one's going to do that. They're just going to read it as, oh, that's a train coming towards the camera.
Yeah, the other thing, too, is that with Blair Witch, the movie itself isn't necessarily the issue I have. It's the sort of legacy of shaky hand cam films that have followed it.
Oh, fair enough. I feel like Blair Witch and Cloverfield probably popularized that the most.
They opened the portal to shaky cam hell.
Yes. And I mean, even then, like, not even horror films in, like, a found footage format even are exclusively the ones that do the shaky cam. I mean, certain action movies really like the shaky cam. And maybe for action movies it was a different culprit for that, but I mean, when I was watching Obi-Wan for the first time, God, the shaky cam is so obnoxious.
May I suggest a movie if you really like shaky cam, Ian? May I suggest watching the latest Bourne Identity movie, like the last one, where there's a scene where he climbs a fence and there's like 12 cuts?
Oh no, see, that's not Bourne Identity. That was
That's not
Taken
Bourne?
3.
Taken
and I
3
have
is
seen
that.
that clip.
Taken 3
that
is
whole,
that?
Yeah. And I've
What was
actually
the
seen
Bourne
that
one?
whole scene. It was a whole chase scene
Yes.
with Liam Neeson and a bunch of cops. And yes, that whole scene is like that. It is so disorienting. You go
Wait.
from here to there to there to there. It is awful. They very
remember
clearly
what it
got
was.
some schmuck off the street to edit that movie.
I remember what it was. With Bourne Identity, it was any single fight scene was that awful, shaky, snapping back and forth between like 8 cameras nonsense. You can't tell what's happening.
I remember Batman Begins being pretty bad with the quick cuts and shaky cam, too. That's one aspect that, while I like Batman Begins, that part doesn't fully hold up.
I getcha.
But, yeah, Paranormal Activity, Blair Witch don't really hold up as well, and frankly, for anyone that still sings the praises of them, I'm just like, I don't know, man. I think they just get a little too much credit nowadays. I'm not going to say that they aren't significant by any means. They most certainly are, and they have their place in movie history. It's just, you know, the luster that they had isn't quite there as it used to be.
Yeah, it was a unique thing for its time, and the most interesting part about those movies, like for example that and Cannibal Holocaust, is kind of like the impact of just them being made.
I'm not sure if it would count as a horror movie, but anyone who unironically says a Serbian film is a good film, I question them.
Look, we don't
highly
fucking talk about a Serbian film.
Yeah.
Are we throwing all the gratuitous movies out here and pointing fingers? If so,
Go
I'd
for
like
it.
to throw Bone Tomahawk up here as well.
Oh,
heard
Bone
it.
Tomahawk!
I feel like I've heard about that movie somewhere.
It's pretty grotesque at times. There's one scene in particular where I would not be surprised if people shut off the movie and didn't finish it when it came up. I remember seeing that and I'm like, oh. I don't even know how I finished the movie. For anyone interested, you can look up a description of what happens, but holy shit.
Please do look up a description of what happens in Bone Tomahawk before you watch it. Otherwise, you go in and it's like, funny cowboy movie.
In fact, I think there are even people that are kind enough to say, here, when you reach this point in the runtime, just skip ahead to this point so that, you know, your imagination can fill in the blanks, because holy shit. Oh my god. It's pretty bad. Which is a shame, too, because, I mean, Bone Tomahawk is actually a pretty unique Western. And pretty good in a lot of areas. And it has Kurt Russell again. So, hey, that's worth a watch in my book. But yeah, those are our list of what we find to be overrated spooky movies, whether they be Halloween-y or just horror in general. Yeah.
And there's always more. There's always more that we just can't think of because there's so many, but Those are the ones we thought.
Yeah.
Top of our head,
Yes, I'm an eternal critic. I have a list, a book of grudges of movies.
A book
Just
of
flick
grudges.
through the pages.
Saw has like 6 or 7 too many movies. I'll certainly say that part.
Most horror movies series have 6 to 7 too many movies.
Well, yeah, because they make
yeah.
money.
I know Nightmare on Elm Street, like, the sequels are fine because they just get more and more ridiculous and you just want to see, well, how does this character get killed and stuff like that. But
Okay, they stop being good after 3, and then it gets good for the last one, New Nightmare. But look, we're not here to argue about that, okay?
no, we're not. We are, however, here to tell you that we are going to be wrapping up now, given that I think we've pretty much covered everything we want to talk about. And going forward, we will now return to our regularly scheduled programming.
But this has been our inciting moment.
Indeed it has. And until next time, take care, ladies and gentlemen, and catch you on the flip side. Bye-bye.
Farewell.
Adios.